At home around the world, training in pandemic times. Hi, I'm Jake Thorold. I'm one of the current pupils here at 39 Essex and soon to be a tenant. And today we're very lucky to be joined by Sophie Leppington, who is a trainee solicitor at Mishcon de Reya, and I believe has just finished her first year. That's right, isn't it, Sophie?
That's correct. It's lovely to be here. Nice to meet you, Jake.
Very nice to meet you too. So we thought that today we would have a chat about what the experience has been of training both at a barrister's chambers and at a solicitor's firm in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I'm sure we're all very aware of. A disclaimer that today we're not actually at home. We're actually both in chambers, but of course that's a good thing because it shows that life is returning somewhat to normality, whatever that means. And we can start doing things in person again. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to reflect on the last year. So Sophie, where did you spend the pandemic?
So I wish there was a simple answer to that, but I'm sure like a lot of people, I've had a few different experiences during the pandemic. So I actually moved out of my flat planning to go on a nice extended trip to the US just as the pandemic started to happen. So I ended up without a flat. So I actually, and just by chance, I'd gone to visit my boyfriend's family in the Cotswolds. So we sort of got stuck there for the first leg of the pandemic at least. So I spent a lot of time in the Cotswolds, very lucky, lots of lovely walks and nice ways to spend our downtime. So that was really lovely. And then after that, I moved home with my mum for a bit, which was a change because I hadn't lived at home since university. That was in Fulham in London. And then I moved in with my housemate in Battersea, which is where I am now. And so we went into lockdown again just before Christmas, I believe. So that was an interesting first few months of us living together. We were still very much in a lockdown phase. So it's been nice recently to enjoy Battersea and actually get to know the area that I live in. So yeah, that's been my journey. How about you? Where have you been?
I love it. I grew up in Battersea, so it's very nice to meet a fellow Battersonian, maybe.
Big fan.
Yeah, oh, good. Yeah, it's interesting. I think sort of people in their 20s, it's been an interesting time in the pandemic because we sort of, haven't necessarily set up in our own homes or kind of have our own families yet. So a lot of my friends have actually, including myself, have spent time with family, which we may not have actually done otherwise. So, in the context of what's been a, very difficult period, actually, I think that's one of the benefits to come from it. I spent so much time with my brothers and I'm really grateful for that. But similar to you, sort of, was in a flat in London and thought, God, I'm not sure I can see out the pandemic in this quite cramped flat. So I spent some time in the first lockdown in Suffolk with my girlfriend's family and then also moved home. So we're
very similar.
Yeah, I moved home to Battersea. So we're mirroring. And I warned you I was going to ask you this, but any new hobbies during the pandemic?
I mean, aside from I'm sure everyone or most people took up going for a daily walk, and that was lovely. So that was a new hobby. This is a semi-new hobby, but I was into running before, but I hadn't really done very long distances. So I did my first quite anticlimactic half marathon in lockdown. So just picked out a route and just sort of went for it one day. Didn't have a lot to do. Managed to complete that. So that was nice. Met by supporters of 3 people at the end. So I've sort of taken that up, and I more recently then did a half marathon for charity, again a virtual one, but a few more people involved and raise some money. So it was quite nice to sort of develop my running a bit. And also, I don't know if you've heard about paint by numbers. I think a few people got involved with things like that. I actually love art, and I did it a lot as a child, and just then sort of left it because life's been so busy. So that was quite a nice way to get back into doing a few more creative things. So I got a paint by numbers personalized one done of my family cat. So I'm halfway through that. I've sort of given up as things started to open a bit. Again, it's quite a nice sign that I haven't finished it, actually, because life's got a bit more interesting. But I'm halfway through that. But yeah, what about you?
Well, I was going to say, maybe we'll tempt our viewers to stay on by promising the finished
cat.
The finished cat. New hobbies. Now, I picked up my guitar a lot again after a bit of a hiatus. So that was really nice. But I didn't get into any of the baking or indeed the paint by numbers. So maybe that will have to wait.
Fair enough.
But so yeah, let's get into what it's been like. So I first wanted to just sort of get a sense of your background and how you ended up at Mishcon de Reyes, obviously a fantastic firm. What does it take to have your background to end up there?
I'm not sure I can speak for what it takes to need in your background, because I think mine's quite an unusual route. But my experience has been I did pharmacy for my undergrad degree, and that was a 4-year degree. I did that in Nottingham, really enjoyed it. And then after that, you do a sort of a pre-registration year, which is sort of, I guess, the equivalent of doing a pupillage or a training contract. And only at the end of that was I qualified as a pharmacist. So after that, I worked as a pharmacist, did quite a few different things in my job then. And then I'd really been thinking about law. I knew that I'm still qualified as a pharmacist now, so I feel like that would always be an option if I wanted to sort of dip my toes in. I can always go back to that, which is such a privilege and a lucky thing to have. And I really enjoyed my work as a pharmacist, but I'd always thought about law, and I just decided to go for it, take the plunge and make the change. So I got as much experience as I could and involved myself in different extracurricular legal things. And then I went and did the GDL. Applied to Mishcon, was really lucky to secure a training contract that year, and then undertook the LPC. And since then I had a gap, so I worked at the Infected Blood Inquiry. So yeah, I've just done a few different things, which I don't think are typical and definitely not required. A lot of people do just go for the probably the bit more straightforward route and just go straight in there. But I really enjoyed it, and I wouldn't change anything. So yeah.
We'll just make clear that it's not necessary to be a qualified pharmacist to get to Mishcon, but that's
definitely quicker ways.
Yeah. But that's really really interesting. I'll chip in with my less interesting background in a minute, but I wanted to ask whether having that kind of background, whether you see there being any sort of, are they completely different, or do you find that your training as a pharmacist has helped you in your legal stuff? I mean, how do you sort of see those two things fitting together?
So I'd say on the surface they are very different, but I think there have been some transferable skills there, and also just even in indirect ways, things that I think have definitely helped me be more confident in undergoing my training contract. So there's some areas where I think sort of directly applicable. So I'm in the IP department at the moment, and we've been working on a pharmaceutical case, and that's been really interesting for me, because it's sort of thinking about how I would have how my practice would have been affected by necessarily like the facts of the case and things like that. So that's definitely been an area where it has been directly applicable. But then I just think generally, it's given me a bit of confidence. I think having worked before has helped me in some ways, especially having started remotely. You don't know what you don't know, but I know a bit about what it's like to work in a professional way. So that's been helpful. And also just generally, I think as a pharmacist, you're really privileged. You're a healthcare professional. You're working with people's real sensitive personal information that means a lot to them. And I think law is quite similar in a way. People come to you with their issues, and or queries, and it means a lot to them. And it's just dealing with those things sensitively. And also, I think in pharmacy as well, you're often explaining, potentially difficult concepts to people in a way that they can understand, or finding the key information for them. And again, I think that's a skill that has indirectly helped me in law as well. And it's what we do, I think, on a day-to-day basis, breaking down information in a way that's most helpful to people. So it's helped in that way as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Because I think that one of the things I've picked up just off the thing that you just said at the end there, that so much of the job is as you say, picking out the key information and sort of packaging it in a way that is able to be understood by people without a legal background. And I can totally see that that there's a lot of that in pharmacy as well. My background just is less interesting. I studied history at university, like many lawyers, I think, and sort of floated around in academia for a while, but sort of, I suppose my heart kind of wasn't really in it. And then I was encouraged by someone to think about the bar and did some mini pupilages, and found those to be really, really helpful in just explaining what it was all about, and deciding that I might like to be a barrister rather than a solicitor. And then did my law conversion course, then the bar course, and here I am. I'm afraid no interesting back careers. But I think the one thing I would say is I did actually have some jobs beforehand. I worked in a think tank for a while, and I think, as you say, having just some experience of an office and how you're meant to behave in that kind of setting definitely helped, particularly in circumstances where it wasn't a normal time to start a new job, which brings us on very nicely to your experience at Mishcon. So how, just for some context, how does the training at Mishcon work? How's it structured, and what areas do you do, and et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. So I think a lot of law firms structure their training contract in a similar way. Some vary a bit, but the way that Mishcon does it is quite typical. You do 4 6-month, we call them seats, where you work in different departments within the firm. You have to do a mixture of contentious work and non-contentious work. So you have to do at least 1 6-month seat of each of those. I so happen to be going into my 3rd contentious seat. So it's my 3rd litigation seat, which I'm excited about.
You clearly like an argument, Sophie. I'm not going to get on your wrong side.
Definitely don't. No, I'm joking. So it's So they structure it like that, and the way that they do it is this is maybe not so typical, but it's a really nice thing that Mishcon do, is we have a month induction before we begin. So before we even go into a department, we have a month-long induction where we meet the other trainees. Ours was the first year where it was done virtually. It was really well organised, and we all met each other, and we still had breakout rooms and things like that. So we got to know each other quite well. And they sort of go through everything that you might need to know, and you just have to try your best to take it all in. But obviously you can ask questions along the way. So we did that, and then you put down your options of where you might like to go for your departments and areas that you're interested in, and then you get assigned to a team, and you spend 6 months really getting involved with all the day-to-day work in that team, getting to know the team. So I was in the tax disputes team for my first seat. I was quite nervous because I didn't know a lot about tax, actually, but it was a really good experience. It was a lot more relatable than I thought, and it was a nice sized team to get to know the people from home because it wasn't too big. And then I've just done my 2nd seat. I'm just finishing up this week in IP disputes, which I've loved as well. It's been nice. I've had some relevance from my previous career as a pharmacist. And then I'm going on to the competition law team next. So it's quite structured, which I think is nice. And I think at some smaller firms, it's maybe not quite as structured, which for some people they'll really like that. I quite liked having structures and going to one team for a set period of time. So yeah, it's been really good.
Excellent. Yeah, I was going to ask, when you look at the website for Mishcon, there's sort of something like 100 areas of law on there. And maybe if I'd, looking at that as someone who's going to train, I'd be like, well, how on earth am I going to get to grips with that? But it sounds like you actually sort of, even before you start, you've narrowed that down a fair amount.
Yeah, I mean, you don't decide where you're going to go before you start necessarily, but yeah, I think everyone has the sort of areas that they're thinking about or that they're interested in, even if they're broad departments. Like some people, Mishcon do a lot of private work. Some people just know that they'd be really interested in doing a seat in the private department, or I've been in the innovation department for this seat and I really like the work that they do. So yeah, I mean, you're not expected to know every single area. But what I would say is, which is really nice about Mishcon, if you do have an interest outside the team that you're in or the areas where you might sit, because you only get 4 seats, I guess, that's just how it is. You can reach out to people in different departments, ask them about their area of law and sort of have get to know you Teams calls and things like that. And people are really open to that. So I'd met someone in the competition team straight when I joined the firm, just because I knew that they had a farmer background and I was interested in speaking with her about that. And it was really nice that she took the time to meet with me. So you can definitely go outside your 4 areas, but you're not expected to know everything about everything. Yeah, how's yours structured? How does it work for pupillage?
Yeah, quite similarly, although obviously we're only a year rather than 2 years. So we have 4 seats here at 39, and obviously it will vary at different chambers. We do public law, planning and environment law, commercial and construction, and then civil liability. God, I'm pleased I've remembered all of them without tripping up. And essentially the way it works is you have a roughly sort of 2 to 3 months in each seat before moving on. We have some 2 supervisors in each seat, which I found really good because it means you get the kind of breadth within the area of law. Some of those areas are massive. So having 2 different practices I found really, really good. I suppose the other thing is that we have what's called a second 6, which is in your second 6 months of the 12-month pupillage, you start doing your own court work. So 2-3 times a week, I'm in the county courts, I would say up and down the country, but normally in a conference room here, where doing sort of things like road traffic accidents, just to really sort of practice advocacy and learn how to cross-examine and make submissions in an actual courtroom. Because as much as you can practice those things and train those things, I've found that nothing quite comes close to when you have a judge interrogating your line of argument. So that's a really good way of just getting those skills up to scratch, hopefully.
Definitely.
But I think one of the kind of broader challenges is the speed with which you move through the seats. It feels like you've kind of just got your bearings in the area of law. You understand what the main legal principles are, and then suddenly you're whisked away to a completely new area of law, and you've got to sort of start again. How's that been for you? I think that's, for me, has been one of the most challenging parts of pupillage. But what about?
Yeah, definitely. You? I completely agree. I mean, yours are they're quite short as well. So 2 to 3 months. Imagine you're just sort of getting settled and then off you go to the next department or area of law. I think for us, 6 months is actually quite a long time. It is and it isn't. So you sort of start out and you get it's nice knowing you've got a 6-month stretch ahead of you, because you've got quite a long time to sort of get settled in and get to grips with things, and you learn a lot. And then sort of in the last month, you sort of have to come to terms with the fact that you're leaving, and you're quite settled by that point, because 6 months is half a year. So the first changeover, a lot of people I think say that their first changeover is almost the hardest, going from the first seat to the second seat. But actually, I think the first seat was the hardest, just because of starting from home, working remotely, and it's been okay actually. It's quite exciting getting to try something different after being somewhere for a while. But I think by the end of the training contract, I'll quite look forward to just being in one place. But it's been good, and we have a supervisor in every seat. You have the continuity of having a trainee buddy from the year above when you're in your first year, and they're sort of there. You can talk to them about anything. We've got a really supportive early careers team you can go to about any queries that you have. For example, if it was something that you didn't like, you couldn't go to your supervisor about, for example, or you want to just talk to someone outside of your team. So we have that as well. And we also have sponsors, who are senior people in the firm. So mine's a partner in IP, and I can talk to him about seat changeovers, or maybe what options I might want to put down next, or whether there's anything I want to get involved with that I'm not involved with yet, just in terms of my work or elsewhere in the firm. So there's a lot of support there. But yeah, it can't take away from the fact that it's a bit of an upheaval when you move, but it's a good one. It's a good change.
Well, it sounds like you're very well supported, but of course, working from home, the challenges of that. What has that been like?
Well,
starting at a big firm, trying to find your feet. What's the experience been?
Yeah, it's been mixed. I think it was quite daunting at first, because I'm not sure how it works with pupillage, but so I applied for my training contract when I was on the GDL, and then I had about a 2.5 year gap before I started. So I guess in my head, I'd sort of imagined how I thought it would be, and I had friends that had done training contracts, and I could have never imagined that it would have been the way that it was, starting from my childhood bedroom at my mum's house, because I had to move home, because all of those COVID complications. So it was a bit daunting. And I think we were briefly talking about it earlier, but it's that thing where it's sort of the balance between knowing when to sort of reach out for help in a way, because it's a bit of a higher bar when you don't just want to book in a Teams call to ask someone how to file an email. It's a bit, it doesn't seem like it quite merits that. So I think at first it's a bit, it takes a bit of time to work out who you can ask those silly questions to, and you just need to build a bit of a support network around you. But I did feel like we were able to do that quite easily and quite naturally. And, we've got a trainee WhatsApp group, and there's also a few of us that a couple of my fellow trainees, we'd done the LPC together. So it was really nice to have them as well. So yeah, it was definitely daunting. But I think after those initial few weeks of getting over the shock and just realizing, look, you can't control it, you don't know what's going to happen, just go with it. It was fine, and everyone's been friendly, and we've just sort of rolled with it as things have changed. I think nothing's really predictable at the moment. It's a bit more so now, but it just hasn't been. So just been trying to go with it and be positive, but it has been good. How have you found it?
Yeah, I think some of the same experiences for sure. I've been coming in. I've had to come in to Chambers for a lot of it, so I haven't had as much working from home. But even still, Chambers has been quiet, and that there haven't been, the social things as much as there would have been. So meeting people has been a challenge. I've been really lucky to have great supervisors here who have fielded all manner of very, very basic questions, much more basic than how to file an email, sort of things like how to open doors and things like that. I agree that that was there was a sort of added barrier to asking those kind of questions. You know, it wasn't always the case that my supervisor was sitting opposite me and I could just sort of spot an opportune moment. You're like, oh, well, what if they're, I don't know, you don't want to call them up and they're deep in a kind of deadline crisis. So I think it definitely posed challenges along those lines. And I also think that I probably had to be, particularly having two supervisors, I think I had to be more proactive in kind of managing my diary and managing my time, because it wasn't the case that everyone was sort of in and that we could sort of organically work out what I was going to be doing one day to the next. I had to sort of say, well, I've got something on these days, but not something on these days. Because I think it would have been easier to maybe I don't think I'd have fallen through the cracks because supervisors would have noticed that. But I think it made it more smooth, being a bit more kind of, proactive, I guess, in just sort of making sure things were running smoothly.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we definitely, it was necessary to be more proactive. And I guess we're lucky in a way, or I see it as a bit that we're lucky in some ways that this is sort of all we've known. So we've just had to be proactive and pick up those habits from the start. And it maybe was a bit of a steeper initial learning curve, but now I feel like that's just normal and we're just used to that. Whereas I think some people I think the trainees in the year above, they had 1 6-month seat where it was quite normal and then they went into lockdown. And I guess in a way, it's a blessing and a curse either way. It's quite nice that they had the opportunity for it to be really normal, but then I think their second seat was probably more of a shock. Whereas I guess for us, it's kind of all we've ever known during our training, and now it's only getting better as things open up more. So it's like a nice thing at the end.
Yeah, I think that's right. And now as it's opening up, we know. I feel like I know a lot of the people, even if it's only sort of through meeting, and therefore that transition I think won't be as kind of stark as having just started and then it kind of then it all changing so very suddenly. But it will. I'm sure it will. It will be strange to have lots of people back in chambers. At points I felt like chambers was my own personal full-story office.
You're in Kingdom.
And the air. I mean, I have a really stark memory of in January at one point walking down the length of Chancery Lane and not seeing anyone. And I mean, it's sort of just unthinkable. So a very strange experience.
It's crazy. I've had similar experience because I was working at when I was working at the Infected Blood Inquiry, we were working just off Fleet Street. I was always busy in the week. I mean, I don't think it's the busiest place at the weekends. It's quite a legal district, but it was always busy in the week. And then because I've been in litigation seats, I have been coming in at times, even from the start, to take bundles to court and things like that. And just seeing Fleet Street and Kingsway and areas and Chancery Lane, it's like such a ghost town. It's just crazy. You can't imagine it. And a lot of places weren't even open. I don't know if you found that. I think it was just like 2 Pretz. The rest was just closed. So that was the only choice for lunch. Thinking about it, that's one of the great challenges of my pupillage has been, well, where do I go for a haircut? Where do I go for a dry cleaning? But thankfully know that now those challenges are letting off a little bit. Definitely.
So what, I mean, do you see, I suppose we sort of touched upon this a little bit. Do you think that there's been kind of any benefits in the having to train in these kind of circumstances?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's been quite a few benefits. We have to be more diverse in the way that we work. Like, we're able to work remotely now. And it's been quite nice to be in law at a time, especially training at a time where we are getting more used to things being able to like function remotely. So even if that's, making more e-bundles rather than hard copy bundles, I feel quite lucky that I've trained at a time when that's sort of been a focus, because I think that will probably be the reality going forwards. We will have more online working, even setting up meetings over Teams and carrying out meetings over Teams. I think it's good to have the option of those things. I mean, I don't have previous experiences at Mishcon to compare it to of exactly how it was before. I can only imagine it, but I think it's quite nice that clients have the option. I'm sure they probably would have before as well, but more of an obvious option to not have to come into the office and to be able to do a client meeting over Teams, even to do hearings remotely over Teams and host them in the office. It's sometimes maybe it's a different but also slightly nicer environment maybe sometimes than being in the courtroom, But I think it's nice to have options, basically. And I think that that's something we're going to have going forward. And I think definitely for Mishcon, there's a lot of encouragement there to be in the office and to be communicating and to have those in-person conversations, because I don't think you can fully replicate it online. But I think it's nice that we have the option of working both ways now, and we've managed to make that work. So I just think going forward, we've just got more choice. And I think as a member of staff, it's nice. I think there's a lot more understanding now of people's home commitments. I mean, you said earlier, we're not maybe at the phase of life we've got like houses or families of our own or things like that. But I think it's quite nice that people are probably more understanding of those things and are happy for people to sort of adapt their workday a little bit around their commitments, as long as they're making it work with their team. And I think Mishcon's quite encouraging of that. And is also encouraging of us being in as much as possible, like as we're permitted and allowed to do so. So I think going forward, it's quite refreshing. How have you found it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think as we've touched upon, there have been challenges, and I would have loved to have met some of more of my colleagues, and but hopefully that will come with time. But I think I do feel that being introduced at a time when everything has changed has probably been a real benefit in terms of things like learning how to work paperless, and that starting that from the off. I know some of our barristers say that's been a really like big tough transition. The days of kind of 50 bundles are maybe on the way out. So I think starting from the off in that way is a really good thing. And then, as I say, I mean, most of my court work is now remote, and I'm not sure whether that's a benefit or not. On the one hand, obviously, it means I just have to pop upstairs rather than getting on a train anywhere, which saves time and saves money. But at the same time, I was sort of quite excited to go and see Southend and places like that. So maybe again, as picking up on what you were saying, a bit of both, and a more flexible, a more hybrid approach is going to be the way going forward. I think also Chambers has been forced to, things like this podcast, to think about how can you start building relationships with people and meet clients and things like that when that's not possible in person. And again, learning how to do that kind of thing whereas before, it might just be much sort of, you would just go to an event or something like that. Being more creative in how you go about marketing yourself and meeting people, hopefully will only stand us in good stead going forward.
Definitely.
So I was going to ask, how is Mishcon seeing things going forward, as in terms of people coming into the office, big changes in the way it works, and you, I think, touched on some of this, but what does it look like going forward?
I think they're still taking a somewhat cautious approach and trying to think too far ahead almost. But they have said that I think they'll be understanding of people being slightly flexible or more flexible than what they maybe would have been pre-pandemic with their working day going forward. And I feel like there'll always be some option to work from home if you need to for a particular reason. I think they're quite conscious of the fact that for junior staff like us, for example, it's been hard training remotely, and I think they're really encouraging of there being, trainees, for example, and junior lawyers coming in, and there being support around them to really help with learning, because I think you do learn a lot face to face, and they recognise that. But I think it will be flexible, but just with a real emphasis on people coming in when they can, and as long as they're comfortable to do so. And you can't replace those little chats that you might have off Teams. You probably wouldn't have them in the same way if you're on a Teams call or a Zoom call. So I think it's recognising that that's important, and to get to know one another within a team, to have that bond. And we've always been a very personable firm, and it's what we pride ourselves on. So I think there will be encouragement for people to come in, but there'll be understanding around that, and they'll be flexible. And like you were saying earlier about being more creative with events and things like that, I think that they're trying to organise virtual events still. I think we've got a presentation coming up in our team in September, which external people can come to. And I think things like that are also quite nice, actually, because if people can't make them, like if people can't make an event, they miss an event. But if you can't make a virtual meeting, often they'll be recorded, or a virtual event will be recorded, and people will be able to access them. So I think it's, like you say, thinking of creative ways to be sociable and connect people, but still have that in-person contact. How do you think Chambers will? Yeah,
I was just going to say, I think it's a really good, it's a really good point as well, that a lot of the benefits are that, people with caring responsibilities or other things that mean that, maybe getting into central London for events, there's a really nice way through online events that it can be more inclusive, and I think that's a real benefit of the shift. I think Chambers, again, I think my sense is keen to kind of try and have people come in and build a bit more of a sense of a team, because lots of us don't know each other too well, and we have new joiners who haven't really been able to come in. So similarly, I think that there's a recognition that the things have changed. Obviously, in a kind of, we're very lucky that we can work both at home and here. Obviously, it's not true of many jobs, but I think that there's a recognition that we have to be a bit more flexible, and people will be more flexible, but at the same time, a caution about just sort of, throwing the office in the scrap heap of history. I think I was saying to you beforehand, it's been interesting over the course of the pandemic, because I feel like at the beginning, a lot of my friends who have office jobs and who suddenly were working from home just sort of thought, well, the office is dead, and what an amazing thing it is to just be able to roll out of bed and just move next door. But I feel like as time has gone on, actually that has completely changed, and people are now sort of clamoring for the office, just for the change of scene, and as you say, for those kind of social elements, but also learning things from in-person conversations that it's just much more difficult to do so. I feel like I now value my commute in a way that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, as just a sort of time to change gears. So I think that we're agreed that it would be almost a shame if that kind of sense of in-person stuff went, but at the same time, there's some benefits and some good things to come from a more, again, hybrid seems to be the word of the word of the conversation. No, I agree.
Have you found that Chambers is getting busier lately? Because our offices definitely have, and I've really enjoyed that. I've been sharing an office with my colleague lately, and previously hadn't ever sat in an office with someone. I was only used to sitting in on my own, and it's been so nice to see more people around the office. Just wondering if Chambers is sort of picking up a bit more on the numbers front.
It definitely was. Then the summer holidays,
right?
Summer holidays hit, and we've been a bit quieter. But yes, I think in sort of when the legal restrictions started to lift and numbers were going down, I think quite a lot of people were quite happy to get back to Chambers.
Good.
Well, I think it feels like we've covered a lot of ground, but I thought I would just finish by. Well, actually, no. I'm going to ask you two. I'm going to ask you two questions. I wanted to ask you first if you have one experience of your training so far that's really stood out as a really positive time and something you've learned a lot from.
Definitely. I think I was really lucky in my IP seat that I got to work on Sky Court of Appeal hearing. It was a lot of IP cases don't necessarily get to the Court of Appeal, and I was just really lucky that as I came into my seat, things were sort of beginning to gear up, and I helped with a lot of the preparation for that. And it was just so interesting, and it was a weird one as well. And again, hybrid being the word of the day, but that was a true hybrid, I think, court hearing, in the sense that it did actually happen live and it happened in the Court of Appeal, but because of social distancing, we were also watching from the office, so there was a lot of back and forth. But that was an amazing experience, because it was really nice to have the opportunity to meet counsel, speak with them, meet them in person. Also, it was the first case that sort of stood out to me where I got to, to just meet a lot of people and work on it with a lot of people and be in the office. And I think that's why it stands out to me, because not only was it quite high profile, so it was an amazing opportunity in that sense. It was probably the first case that I worked on where I had as much of a normal experience as possible, I would say, of a pre-COVID normal experience. So I really enjoyed working on that. That was fantastic. How about you? Is there...
Yeah,
your standout?
A few. I think the thing that really I was very lucky just when I started my second six, so when I could practice. I got the opportunity to be a junior to one of the QCs here, William Norris QC, and so we went down to Bristol for a week-long trial relating to an injured racehorse. It was quite a sad, a sad case, but. It was just, it was so brilliant to be in court, and there was William Norris QC, Patrick Lawrence QC on the other side, and then me on the sort of front row, which sort of felt quite intimidating, but also an amazing experience. And I think for the similar reasons, we were able to be there with solicitors, with clients. There was also an element of kind of hybrid stuff going on, but I think that was a really brilliant experience, and just to see two really brilliant advocates in action for someone at my stage just felt like a really excellent learning experience. So hopefully many more things like that to come.
Fingers crossed.
Well, just finish on. I think we were saying that might be the case that some people watching are thinking of applying either to become a solicitor or to become a barrister, and standing at the beginning of that quite daunting process of the applications and LPC, bar school. If you had sort of one piece of advice, would you please share?
Sure. One piece of advice. I don't know if this counts as one, it might sort of be two. I think really think about what you want to do, and that's easier said than done. So my second part of that advice is to really immerse yourself in as many experiences as possible. that are legal related. And I know it's really difficult to get work experience, and so I don't necessarily mean that, but I just think there's lots that you can do, like look at resources. I mean, for example, a video like this would give insight into what it's like to either go down the training contract solicitor route or the pupillage barrister route. I think try and think about those two options and figure out which one might suit your skill set better, or what you might be slightly more interested in. If you're unsure, try and get experience or talk to people in one or the other. And when I say experience, I think there's literally just so many resources and so many even events. I'm sure there's a lot of online events now. So to not necessarily worry if you can't get that work experience in a firm or a solicitor or a chambers straight away, like if you don't have a contact, I think there's still stuff that you can do. So I went to a few STEM events, which because of my science background, there was like STEM careers event of people from science backgrounds going into law that I was just able to apply for and turn up, and just things like that. I think you can really get involved, and you can go to the courts. I think just to show that you're really interested, and also for you to figure out that you are definitely interested, because it is a long process. But if anyone wants to do it, they definitely can. I just think immerse yourself as best you can and as much as possible would be my advice.
Yeah,
what would yours be?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. I think, I don't think I really knew that you could just. I mean, obviously it's been a bit different in the last year, but that you could just go and sit in the back of a courtroom. It's sort of not necessarily something that is really intuitive. And I think, yeah, as you say, that's where it happens. And so that's a really good way to get a sense of whether it interests you, what the actual content and process of the law is. I think in really basic, but I suppose quite similar is, I think reading judgments as well, and just learning how to read a judgment, and seeing whether you find the reasoning interesting and engaging. So, all Supreme Court judgments are up on online, and they're often a really good way to start, because, they're aimed at being accessible. All judgments are, but the Supreme Court is particularly good at it. I think that's a really good practice to get into, whether you're thinking about whether you want to become a lawyer at all, but also if you're thinking about how to kind of gear up for things like training contract interviews, pupillage interviews. So that would be what I would say.
Definitely.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. I hope that those watching have found it interesting to see what we've been through. But thank you so much, Sophie, for coming and sharing your experiences. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you.
And likewise, thank you so much for your time, and I've really enjoyed learning more about the pupillage process. So thank you so much as well.
Brilliant. Bye now.
Bye.